Good afternoon, members. Thank you very much for coming back. And I'd like to particularly welcome Alison Williams, who is to be our new Director of Economy, Place and Learning, who's joining us this afternoon. You're very welcome. Members, we're going to resume item 10 that we had started prior to the lunch recess, and we're going into the comments section. The Leader of the Council and Deputy Leader have moved a motion, so we're now in comments. So if you have comments you wish to make, please put C in the chat. I have an amendment from Councillor Duff. It's in the wrong chat, but it's come through to me. So Councillor Duff, you have an amendment.
Sorry, Provost, I thought I was in the right chat, but maybe not. I'll have asked if the clerk could maybe put the wording of the proposed amendment up.
I'm sorry, while we wait, Councillor Illingworth, you have indicated you have a declaration of interest.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
Yeah, I think I'd like to make a declaration of interest and withdraw in my capacity as being on the board of Perth Theatre and Concert Hall, so I'll just withdraw. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Duff, if you just wait a second while Councillor Illingworth withdraws, and then you can move your amendment. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, just wait a second, Councillor Duff. Councillor Leader.
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could have a ruling from the head of legal, because if we've all to withdraw who've been members previously of the ALIOs or who are currently on the ALIOs, you may be left yourself to decide the result of the amendment. So if we could get a ruling, please.
I don't have a problem with that. I would expedite the business today. Would the head of legal and governance like to provide further advice to the advice that she's already issued?
Yes, I have provided written advice to all elected members as regards the positions in terms of elected members. Obviously, those who are board members of either Live Active Leisure, Culture, Perth and Kinross, or Perth Theatre and Concert Hall have a connection. To determine whether that constitutes a declarable interest, you then need to determine whether or not your position as a board member puts you in a position of conflict with the recommendations that are before you in the paper. To help with some of that determination, it might be helpful for me to give you some further clarification on what you're being asked to do and in what capacity today. You're being asked today as council, who are the sole trustees for these charitable organisations and are also the commissioner of the services for these services that are delivered in that vehicle. You're being asked to consider a review in order to determine efficiencies, savings. You are not being asked to make a decision to merge the ALIOs. You're not making a decision to bring that in-house. The Head of Culture and Communities has already made that very clear in terms of what's being asked to do. So whether or not you think you have a conflict of interest is a matter for you. I can't comment on what position your board has taken or what position you want to take as a board member. But if you feel that the recommendations that you're being asked to make today conflict with that, then it is a declarable interest and you should leave the room. If you do not feel that you're being put into a position of a conflict of interest, then you're perfectly entitled to stay and participate in the debate and vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor John Duff to move the amendment.
Thank you, Provost. The text of the amendment is on the screen there, and effectively, with the exception of recommendation 3, which we're happy to accept, we are asking that the remaining recommendations be deferred from today to a future meeting so that we can have an elected member briefing session and find out some of the more detail that we've wanted to have prior to the paper today. So I recognise the challenges that we face as a council. I'm well aware of these and the challenges that the ALIOs face. This isn't about shirking difficult decisions, but I think it's important that we make these decisions in the full knowledge of the details and the implications. We've heard from members today a number of concerns with things like affordability, about merging the 3 sports venues into the one location, and the lack of opportunity perhaps to hear from the ALIOs themselves on these matters. The recommendation refers to the leisure asset review paper in terms of the sports venues, which I believe is coming to the next council meeting. And I wonder if it would have been better for both these papers to have been brought together at the same meeting in any case. I think having an elected member briefing session prior to today would have been beneficial and would have meant that the concerns of members could have been explored further prior to consideration of the recommendation today. I think these are genuine concerns of members, and hence the reason why the request or the proposal amendment for a deferral has come before you at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Allen to second.
Thank you, Provost. I think we all agree that we've got some real stringent and difficult financial and budgetary decisions to take going forward. With regards to the amendment here, I read all of these papers quite scrupulously and try to come up with comments and questions as I can. I just felt today that I just don't have sufficient information to make a genuine and reasonable decision. So I'm happy to second the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. I have a reasonable list of comments now coming in, and I'm going to go to Councillor Robertson, who had put his request in first in the previous chat before lunch. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. I've listened to the amendment, and I'm actually happy to go with the paper as is. I think we all have an opportunity to ask all the questions that we needed to ask or wanted to ask, and it's been a really good information gathering exercise. And I just think it'd be a shame to delay further by going with the amendment. What I was going to say prior to lunch was that our ALIOs have actually been a tremendous success story, because I've been in the council a few years now, and I've seen the storms and difficulties that our ALIOs have had to cope with, and they've managed to come through them and be still as strong as ever. And that's in no short measure thanks to the efforts of officers like Fiona Robertson, who I know is dedicated to the long-term future of our services. And so Perth and Kinross now has, in my opinion, some of the country's leading sports facilities and leisure facilities and cultural offerings, and that's down in no short measure to the efforts of the boards of these organisations. And I've served on 2 ALIO boards in my time, so I know the dedication and the hard work that goes into it. But we have to make sure they're fit for purpose and fit to go forward in the future. And what the mover of the motion has said is correct. The amendment, rather. We have very, very difficult financial problems ahead of us, but we can't shirk them. We've got to face them head on. So based on that, I'm pleased to and happy to support the paper as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. Like Councillor Robertson, I am fully supportive of the paper as it's presented here today. I think that not only have the answers been provided by officers clear and unequivocal. They've also are very factual in their matter. I think also for elected members, they should recall, and certainly I do as convener of scrutiny during the last political term, we had all three ALIOs, both individually and sometimes collectively, attend, and many of the points in this paper were raised at those during those meetings, and I believe they still continue to appear before Scrutiny and Performance Committee. And despite a willingness to look for efficiencies collectively, they've been unable for one reason or another to progress those individually or collectively. So I think it's absolutely appropriate and timely that we as a council move this forward. And furthermore, on a more parochial basis, 2 of the 3 properties that are not owned by Perth and Kinross Council are in my ward. And as everyone will know, there has long been a decision to be made about the future of those properties. And I think this paper will help to clarify a lot of things, will enable efficiencies that are necessary to be made without impinging upon the individuality or the uniqueness of each individual ALIO as they stand alone. And I think any reason to delay is there isn't one in my view that's good enough. We need to move on. We need to get this done, and we need to. And I wholeheartedly endorse the paper as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I said earlier, I'm Director Trustee of Culture Perth and Kinross. I don't consider that I have a conflict of interest, and this paper is not proposing a merger of any of the ALIOs. I think it's also important the signal that we send out that we're not going to kick the can down the road. We do need to proceed with pace, and I do take into account the comments in the Glasgow Audit Report where they state we recognise the severe resourcing pressures faced by the Council and its ALIOs. One's not disputing that, but this is a key part, I believe, of the Council's transformation process. I think it's crucial that we begin to go forward on this. Fiona Robertson has referred to a 3-year timescale for implementation. There are transformation reserves, and we want to see how far we can progress. But the key thing with this paper, and I support it, is compared to 4 or 5 years ago, when we were talking about the possibility of some kind of super ALIO, of merging of the trusts, and I think the view some people had at that time was bigger is better. You would get economies of scale. And I must say at that point, I did take the view. In fact, you had the real danger of ending up with diseconomies of scale. I'm not going to go through all the aspects here, don't have the time. And I think clearly the leisure assets review and the overall property review, and from what I understand, that asset review is going to be quite a chunky document on the 22nd of January. But on the basis of that information, what we do want to move to, and it may be not all folk in Culture Perth and Kinross or other ALIOs would agree with everything I'm saying, what we've got to make progress. Fiona Robertson talked about the need for commonality, but what I do think we should stress, and it's maybe appropriate term in terms of Perth Theatre and Concert Hall, is not rigid uniformity, it's not unison, but a much greater degree of harmony, and that seems applicable here. I think the other point that Fiona Robertson has made, and I think should be reassuring to the ALIOs, is her comment about their distinct personalities and brands. And that applies in quite a number of areas. It applies in terms of fundraising. I think that's important. So they have distinct identities still. However much we have consolidation of various services, I think it matters in terms of the ethos of the staff, that they're not just employees of Perth and Kinross Council. They are, they work for Culture Perth and Kinross, or for LAL, or the Old Horse Cross. I think it's important also in terms of the voluntary effort that goes into these bodies, in terms of the support and effort that so many put in. And I know with Perth Museum, voluntary effort is going to be an important aspect of that once we get underway after Easter. I think there's also, we could get tied up if we had mergers that on legal technicalities, bringing together articles of association, memorandums, so on. I really do hope and there's going to be obviously updates from the council to the council on I think a fairly frequent basis, but we've got to start to move forward. We don't delay. We don't indeed, as I said earlier, kick the can down the road. We want to start to try to move forward with pace. And I think there could be yet benefits, not just in terms of cost saving, but in terms of how those three ALIOs can offer a better and enhanced service to the communities that they serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. Councillor Collins, Chair.
Thanks, Provost. As I expressed in my questioning earlier, I do have some sympathy with Councillor Duff's amendment in terms of taking the time rather than just the week since the papers have been published to have an elected member briefing session would be useful. However, I think that most of the recommendations in the paper are things that, as Councillor McCall noted, the arm's length external organisations have been challenged on, both at Scrutiny and Performance Committee in this term and in the previous term at the former Scrutiny Committee. And I think that on balance, given that the opportunity and the encouragement has been there to achieve some of alignment of these crucial support services within the ALIOs, it's now time that we actually forced a bit more in terms of pace of change. I note the recommendation from Audit Glasgow. I'm pleased to see it actually, specifically about working out how we hold the ALIOs to account for the services that they're contracted to provide and how those services contribute to the achievement of the council's plan and corporate objectives. Certainly something that I know that the ALIOs have been challenged over before in terms of what outcomes do they actually achieve, in terms of improving the cultural and social life of the residents of Perth and Kinross, in terms of improving the health and well-being of the residents of Perth and Kinross, and I think that is a useful recommendation. The only slight tweak that I would request that maybe the leader and deputy leader of the council could make to their motion is instead of reinstating quarterly monitoring of ALIO by Scrutiny and Performance Committee, which I think is a bit specific, that we review and consider quarterly monitoring of ALIO by Scrutiny and Performance Committee. I think that quarterly monitoring would suggest that we have the ALIOs before us 4 times a year. We have 5 scheduled meetings of the committee next year. Previously, the committee had decided to take a more proportionate response, which was to call the ALIOs less frequently when we had lesser concerns about the risk that they pose, and more frequently when we had greater concerns. I think at the moment, in terms of the paper that's before us, but also in terms of some of the turnover of officers at the top of the organisations, we would want to have them back more frequently. But I think it should be up, it should be at the discretion of either myself and the vice convener or the committee as a whole to decide exactly the frequency that we want. And I wouldn't want us to tie us in to having the ALIOs before us at every on a quarterly basis, i.e. 4 out of the 5 meetings in a year. But broadly supportive of the thrust of the recommendations, and hopefully that small tweak could be made. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll give you the councillors indicating.
Yeah, I've complete confidence in the convener and vice convener of scrutiny and the scrutiny committee to make decisions of how regularly they wish to see the allows appear. And I would suggest that at this time, as we go towards budget, they would see them all at the next meeting, but then thereafter, I'll leave it up to the officers and of the committee and the convener and vice convener on the committee to decide how regular. So I'm quite happy to accept that.
Mr Deputy Leader.
Likewise, Provost, thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have Councillor Peter Barrett next.
Thanks, Provost. I might be the only one to say it today, but I welcome the report from Audit Scotland. I believe it is timely. In fact, it is possibly at least a year overdue. And I think if we'd had this report a year ago, we might have approached the savings efficiencies that this council had asked from the ALIOs with a clearer mind. And we'd have been a year ahead in terms of driving forward efficiencies through the ALIOs if we'd had it sooner. I think the report sets out a clear direction and it makes a compelling case for following that direction to improve governance across the three ALIOs, which will result in better financial reporting and performance management. Identifies areas where efficiencies can be achieved in back office functions, in payroll, financial systems and personnel, and a joined up approach to commercial marketing of facilities and for conferences. Greater and stronger resilience through alignment of IT strategy, security, hardware and software. And I think that we would be derelict in our duties to ignore this, the report, or to consider deferring the recommendations in it. Recommendation 7 from Audit Scotland refers to the creation of a hub of excellence. Provost, I'd be happy just to settle for a hub, which would still be a significant improvement, even without achieving status of excellence. However, when it comes to payroll, let's not have a minimalist approach set out in recommendation 10. I can see no reason for duplicating payroll functions. That might be better than triplication, but there doesn't seem to be any justification to me for having more than one payroll system. Provost, there is a clear thread running through the audit for the need for a one council family approach, and I think that sadly that one council family approach is completely absent in the letter that we received from the Chief Executive of Perth Concert Hall and Theatre. I think it was completely lacking in the presentation that we received from his predecessor in the budget process last year, and it was completely lacking in the Armageddon scenario painted by the chair of Live Active Leisure in the run-up to last year's budget as well. I think I would agree with Councillor Robertson that it would have been helpful to have a more detailed picture of the service cuts that we in the three ALIOs will be confronted with, and to address the deficit there, because that would have served as a reality check when considering the most controversial aspects of the report, which is the consolidation of the ALIO property portfolios, particularly for sport, where there needs to be a reckoning that we cannot put off forever or indeed any longer. We need to bite the bullet and to give officers a clear mandate as set out in the Glasgow audit report and approve the recommendations of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Bailey.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with much of what's been said before, that really it is time for action on these ALIOs, that we've been talking about them a long time. Councillor Barrett very rightly paints that picture of the kind of Armageddon scenarios we're warned about before every budget setting process. This is a good, calm reflection we have about the ALIOs and how they're doing, and has some sensible routes forward. And I think that really to defer today would be to be a bit like having the patient in front of us. We have the diagnosis of the problem. We might disagree about the treatment plan, but we definitely need a treatment plan. I think what we've got in front of us today is the treatment plan. So to defer that treatment plan would be to the detriment of the patient and to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Councillor James next.
Thanks, Provost. Sorry, just got the Googles. Yes, sorry. These ALIOs boards are made up of some very, very competent and experienced professionals, and who've run very large and successful businesses. And I don't think that they've been consulted enough on the decisions that we're being asked to make today. And that's why I'll go with the amendment for a deferment to allow them to perhaps state their case. I mean, we're hearing from councillors today that we need to act at pace. That's fine, but I don't want to be repenting at leisure. So I think we need to take a sensible approach to this and look at all the facts and get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Forbes, you have snuck in a comment there at the very last minute, so you can have it.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be supporting the amendment on this one. I think there's two things that are really worrying me about this. We haven't had an elected members briefing. I know we don't have them for everything, but we've certainly had other stuff which I would regard as far less important than this that we have had private briefings on, and it gives us the opportunity to bounce the ideas around in private and come to some kind of unanimous decision. So I'm not very happy that we've not had one of those. I'm disappointed that the chief execs of the ALIOs were not allowed to participate in today's meetings. We let Glasgow Audit or Audit Glasgow or whatever they're called participate, but not the ALIOs. I think we missed a trick on that one. So I think the right thing to do is just to delay this, have an elected members briefing, get back around the table and make the decision. No one disputes the fact that we have to do something about this, but I think Ian James said, let's not repent at leisure. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Duff, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Provost. I was very tempted to respond to Bailey's medical comments there, but having seen the inside of more hospitals and more treatment plans this year than I ever wished to, I'll refrain. Let's be clear, this amendment seeks a deferral for a period of 6 weeks. I'm not making any judgment on the recommendations themselves, just that we should take the opportunity to explore the matter further before reaching these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Lane.
Thanks.
Sir Leader.
Thanks, Provost. I find myself very much in agreement with Councillor Peter Barrett. Another unusual occurrence, possibly. I think that there's hard choices to be made. And as we go through the budget process, there's going to be really hard choices to be made. We've debated this quite fully. To me, it is one of the most obvious and easiest choices that we're going to be faced for. The work's been done by the officers. Fiona Robertson has spent years getting us to this point. We've asked for this transformation paper to come forward. We've asked for Audit Glasgow or Glasgow Audit to be involved. We've got the recommendations. We've heard several times that the ALIO chief executives and the chairs were involved in the discussion. So I don't think we can waste any more time. Let's get this decision done. It is to make backroom synergies help to provide frontline services, and surely that's what we're all about, is to let the funding flow through to the front desk, if you want, and benefit our residents. So obviously I commend the motion to the chamber.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. I'll now ask the clerk to take a roll call.
Thank you, Provost. Members, we're dealing with item 10 on the agenda, the transformation review of arm's length external organisations. We have a motion by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Drysdale, to agree the recommendations in the report. However, the motion was further refined to include the suggestion from Councillor Stewart regarding the timings of reporting to the Scrutiny and Performance Committee. We have an amendment from Councillor Duff, seconded by Councillor Allen, the terms of which were shown on the screen. When I call out members' names, can they confirm if they're voting for the motion or the amendment? Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Bailey. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Motion.
Bailey Brock. Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson,
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale,
Motion.
Councillor Duff,
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes,
Amendment.
Councillor Frampton, Councillor Freshwater,
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey,
Motion.
Councillor James,
Amendment.
Councillor Kigali,
Amendment.
Councillor Lang,
Motion.
Councillor Leishman,
Motion.
Councillor McPherson,
Motion.
Councillor Massey,
Motion.
Councillor McCall,
Motion.
Provost,
Motion.
Councillor McEwen, Bailey McLaren,
Motion.
Deputy Provost,
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck,
Motion.
Councillor Reid,
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson,
Motion.
Councillor Shires,
Amendment.
Councillor Smith,
Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart,
Motion.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
Motion.
Councillor Waters,
Motion.
Councillor Welsh, and Bailey Williamson. Provost, we have 26 votes for the motion and 11 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you very much, Mr. Henry. Members, we now move on to item 11, non-domestic rates relief on unoccupied lands and heritages. Okay, welcome back to those members who are rejoining us. We've moved on to item 11 at this point now, and I'm going to ask Lynn Brady, the Service Manager for Revenues and Benefits, to introduce the report.
Good afternoon, councillors. A significant change was made to legislation surrounding the award of non-domestic rates reductions for empty lands and heritages this year. The statutory schemes were withdrawn and autonomy was given to Scottish local authorities to create relief schemes to suit the needs of their own ratepayers. This council agreed to replicate the previous statutory schemes for the current financial year with a commitment to review the position for future financial years. This paper now puts forward the proposed scheme to be put in place for financial years 24-25 and 25-26. Further consideration will be required for financial years 26-27 onward once the funding position is known, as the current level of funding has only been secured for the current and the 2 future years. The proposals in this paper seek to strike a balance between providing better support to landlords in the short term while encouraging owners to bring long-standing empty premises back into active use. This paper recognises that some cases may require an element of discretion in the level of reductions to be given and provides an avenue for such discretion to be considered. The proposal, by ending unlimited exemptions on certain lands and heritages, is estimated to yield more than £500,000 for the Council's priorities, with a request for a small proportion to be retained to assist with the administration of this scheme. This paper provides more detail on the legislative provisions, the funding position, the position for the current financial year. It also gives details of the proposed schemes for 24-25 and 25-26. It notes the financial risks associated with the proposals and seeks approval of the proposed scheme. If approved, we intend to communicate with all relevant customers as soon as we possibly can. I am supported by my colleague Kevin Fraser here today and finance colleagues online if there's any questions or any further information that you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks for the document. I've got a question on 9.7, and it's the idea of supporting owners to bring property back into use and then penalising those that make no such efforts. I'm trying to get to the point of how would you judge this? So there may be some properties that are just not possible financially or for other reasons to bring them back into use. Who makes the judgment that someone's tried hard enough to make that happen?
My local taxes team would work hand in hand with our economic development team, and I'm going to pass on to Kevin to ask if he's got anything he'd like to add to that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we would look at things on a case-by-case basis and look to see what the property does or what it recently used to do or what it could be used for to make a case-by-case decision. And as Lynn mentioned, we would engage with economic development to see what additional support could be done for the property. But again, it would be a case-by-case decision using the discretion that we're recommending in the paper and any other levers that we have to try and bring the property into active use.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett and then Councillor Liz Barrett.
Provost, I've got questions relating to two paragraphs. Can I just, right? Paragraph 9.19, I am concerned that moving from an unlimited liability period for executories to a 6-month period is too harsh, and that a 1-year exemption would allow sufficient time for winding up of estates and sale of properties, which 6 months will not. And I wanted to ask officers how that can be accommodated. It's only likely to cost something like £37,000 maximum.
Sorry, apologies. That's something that could be looked at and dealt with under the discretionary element of this proposed scheme. Where it is appropriate, and we look into particular cases, then it could be considered to be extended for the year to assist. Because as I do appreciate, it can be a lengthy process at times, and not in all cases, but it can sometimes.
And what would be the difference between actually setting a 1-year period and having a discretionary period?
The difference would be a bit of more of engagement with the local taxes team and understanding their position rather than just being an automatic award. But we would be more than happy to consider discretion for that type of arrangement.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Kevin. Second question related to paragraph 11.5 and the third arrowed or winged bullet, which refers to a minimum occupancy requirement of 6 months before empty property relief is considered. So I wanted to ask, what is the position for new owners of a property doing up an empty property, and is there relief for them?
There's a couple of ways that would be addressed. If the property had been empty for less than 6 months, they would obviously automatically get the remaining part of the 6 months. If again there was reasons why the property couldn't be occupied in a reasonable state or a reasonable length of time, we could use our discretion and allow the full 12 months for that property to be brought into use. What we also have, apart from the proposals here, is there's an existing statutory scheme called the Fresh Start Scheme. So if a property had already been empty for 6 months, there is another scheme that fully supports ratepayers taking up occupation of properties that have previously been empty for a considerable period of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you. I have two questions. They're both quite short. Looking at 9.17 on listed buildings, I appreciate that getting listed buildings fit for occupation can take a bit longer because of the additional regulations round about them. Is that something that would also be covered in a similar way to the? I think you said it says executors in the paper, but I think you mean executories for the liability, don't you? Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, for the listed buildings, obviously there's different categories, and the higher category would be difficult. There would be more challenges in occupation. So we anticipate that's where discretion may need to be used, where it's maybe category C, where it's maybe just looks like a standard office, but it happens to be listed. I think there's less likely for discretion there. It would fall into the normal rules. For category A and possibly category B, we think they're the circumstances where we would be keen to use our discretion.
Thank you. The other question is about the use of discretion. Just in 940 and 11.5, it refers to economic development and relief if supported by economic development. What does that mean? Who does that mean? Thank you.
Yeah, we would come back with a more detailed explanation of that if the policy is approved in practice. But what we have at the moment for council tax for empty properties is we have meetings with the vacant property development team who sit with economic developments, and between the two of us, that's where the discretion is considered and then referred to more senior officers for approval. So it would be something along those lines, engaging possibly more with the vacant property development team than economic development generally. But again, the other thing we want to do is anybody who's looking for support to bring properties back into use, we're wanting to direct them towards economic development for alternative support at the same time.
So this should help support bringing some of the empty properties in the middle of Perth back into use, because some of them are listed, aren't they? Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Provost. I've got a couple of questions just generally about Section 9. A lot of the work here is done by your department in enforcing some of these issues. How will these issues be policed, and if somebody disagrees with your judgment, how do they appeal, and how does that work? Thanks very much.
There are already pre-existing rules for appealing against any decision to award or not to award any type of rates relief, and these would fall under the same rules. The current rules is we would look at it as officers in the first instance. Maybe a lot of the times it's just a greater information exchange that's required. If there is a formal appeal, it would come back to members to decide. The current arrangement is a subcommittee of the Finance Resource Committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. My question is in two parts, if I may. It's about the clause 9.19 and really about the wording. When you talk about executors, you mean executors of an estate or a will? You do? Yes, there's nodding. So in that case, I'm not sure that executors can become liable for unless they're also inheritors, can become liable for the disposal of or any debts accrued with an estate, or any financial liabilities that should come from the estate, not from the executors themselves, I think. If that can maybe be clarified.
You're correct, and I apologise that the wording on that isn't as it should be. It's the estate that would be responsible. No debt would pass on to the executors as individuals.
If I may ask a supplementary. So in that case, then where does the liability rest with? If the estate itself has not been settled after 6 months?
If the estate hasn't been settled, any charges due by the deceased party would be held in abeyance until the estate was settled.
Sorry to go on about this a little bit, but it's quite important because very often this is a very emotive subject at a particular time. So I'm just wondering if perhaps it needs to be from when the estate, the executors have discharged their duties in terms of the estate, and is that when the 6 months starts, or does it start from the point of when the executors, I can't pronounce it, when the whole process starts?
The way it's put at the moment is that the 6 months would start on the date of death, but again, that could be amended through a discretionary policy if necessary. Sorry.
I actually think this needs to be reworded, this particular clause in its entirety, because I think it's too confusing. And I don't know if I need to bring forward a formal change or amendment, but I would just say that I think the officers have accepted it needs to be amended and reworded. So thank you.
I think there is an agreement that it will be reworded. Yes. Okay. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Provost. The objective of the programme is to make empty properties full. How will we know if that's worked?
We will closely monitor the situation. We monitor all aspects of discounts, exemptions, reductions as it is, and we'll do that on an ongoing basis. Report back to our finance colleagues and other relevant places.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. I'm looking at section 920 to do with lands. Landowners themselves who have, I know we've said before that agricultural land is exempt, but if land's used for grazing or as like some landowners have shooting on there, grouse and pheasant shooting, fishing, I suppose, is that going to be come into this, or I mean, at what point do we go from agriculture to is grazing land classed as agriculture then, rather than arable land? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the decision on whether something should be rated or not would be down to the assessor, who's independent from the council, but anything agricultural would not be rated at the moment, so grazing lands wouldn't come into non-domestic rates and wouldn't be affected. And again, when it comes to shooting or land management, the right to shoot on the land is rated, although the land itself is not. But you'll see in the paper we're looking to make provisions specifically for shooting rights that aren't used for commercial activity. So in general, agricultural land wouldn't feature in this at all and would retain its exemption via the assessor.
Just to clarify, if somebody's got land which they use for farming or grazing or whatever it might be, and happen to have a shooting event on there once a year, would that be allowed? Would it be exempt, or would it have to be, if it's just an isolated event, but still a commercial event?
If it was used for land management, it would be, we wouldn't be charging it rates. If it was used for commercial activity, for commercial shooting, for people to visit and shoot and hunt on the land, we would charge it non-domestic rates. But if it isn't used for any commercial benefit, we wouldn't we wouldn't be looking to charge anything.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, therefore I'm going to invite the Leader of the Council to move the report.
Start again. Thanks, Provost. Councillors Lynn Brady and Kevin Fraser here from our local taxes team have already provided us with commentary on the contents of this report. Before I make further comment, I want to start by welcoming these proposals. The devolving of these non-domestic rates released to us makes good on the commitment by the Scottish Government to provide more powers to councils. As local councillors, we are better placed to know what is best for our communities and what they need. For too long, non-domestic properties across Perth and Kinross have sat empty, many falling into further states of disrepair. The proposals before us today are a sensible and pragmatic approach. They strike the right balance between encouraging owners to bring back properties into use while penalising those who don't. The new scheme is actually more generous in the short term, but removes any reduction for lands and heritages that lay unoccupied over the longer term. The scheme we are asked to support today has the potential to generate more than £500,000 each year, and this money has to be used in the coming year to protect vital frontline services. We're again facing one of the hardest budgets to protect frontline services. This £500,000 used for that will help us greatly moving forward in the coming year. The scheme also includes some degree of discretion for those owners who are making clear efforts to bring their properties back into use. I very much support the paper. Thank you.
The Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Provost. Firstly, as the Leader has said, I'm delighted that decision-making on this important component of local government finance has now been devolved to individual local authorities by the Scottish Government. At a time of particularly challenging financial conditions, the potential financial gain will be carefully deployed to protect services at the 2024-25 budget in just 12 weeks from now. We recognise that unoccupied commercial properties significantly detract from the appearance and vibrancy, especially of our city centre and towns. But we also understand that sometimes the circumstances leading to these voids are driven by distress financial factors. So it is important that a limited degree of discretionary flexibility is afforded to officers. However, ultimately, the changes being proposed today are intended to encourage property owners not to delay in filling any property voids with new tenants when, for example, a previous tenant has not renewed its lease. By limiting financial relief in most circumstances to 6 months, it will be financially prudent for landlords to actively attract new tenants, thereby hopefully helping to improve the appearance and vibrancy of our towns and city, and indeed other areas over the period of time ahead. I'm happy to second. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Leader. Are there any comments on the paper? Councillor Duff, you're requesting a brief recess. Yeah.
Just a minute or two. I want to have a quick conversation with Scott Walker, if that's okay. I think he might. Is he back in the chamber?
Okay.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
5 minutes then.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. Welcome back after that slightly longer than planned recess. Thank you for your patience. We are on item 11, non-domestic rates relief on unoccupied lands and heritages. We are on comments. I have Councillor Leishman with a comment.
Thanks very much, Provost McDade. Firstly, I would like to just extend the credit to our housing department. Being on the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee, I know that we are trying to build as many homes as we can, and we do have an excellent and a very, very excellent rate of buybacks. I appreciate that empty houses and second homes aren't the only reasons of why we have a housing crisis. Oh.
I think we're on the wrong paper there, Councillor.
Oh.
Right, but you'll get the good news, and you get to do it all over again next paper round.
I'm not actually on the wrong paper. I'm just building up to. If everybody just exercise a bit of patience.
Wonderful. Okay, well, continue. We're just testing everyone. It's been a long afternoon. It was just a wee test. Thank you for organising that for us, Councillor Leishman.
Don't worry, I won't start again. I'll just pick up from where I was. I appreciate that empty houses and second homes aren't the only reasons of why we have a housing crisis. There's homelessness, unaffordable rents, damp, mouldy and dangerous homes, a lack of good quality available social housing. All of these things contribute to the housing crisis we have in Scotland. And for many of my fellow councillors, I'm sure their inbox backs that up. The bottom line is that we need more available properties. Also, getting buildings back into use is extremely important. The potential conversion of empty commercial property into affordable housing would go some way to alleviating the housing crisis I described. A city centre that has more in-use commercial or residential properties has multiple benefits for our residents and in boosting tourism to Perth and Kinross, helping businesses and our local economy. Because if you want to get a simple but accurate measurement of how the economy is actually performing, then go for a walk up the high street and see the amount of empty units there are and ask shop owners how trade is. As I started off my contribution by praising our own housing team, I'd like to finish it by praising the efforts of the many independent businesses that have become important features of the retail offering we currently have in Perth. In this ongoing cost of living crisis, times are tough for small businesses, and their presence is helping to keep Perth a go-to destination for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman. There were a lot of doubting Thomases, myself among them, and you were on the right paper there. But we were convinced in the end. So thank you. Councillor Duff, you have an amendment.
Thank you, Provost. Hopefully, Mr. Henry has got the revised text of that.
He does, but I think we're just getting it on screen. But if you maybe wish to talk to it, we will work to get it on the screen.
That's fine. And Provost, the report advises members that the empty property relief funding for the next 2 years will amount to £105 million across Scotland, with our share of that amount for this for 24-25 being £952,516. The revised scheme, as set out in the paragraph 10.7 of the report, estimates the total cost of the revised scheme at £354,280. With the addition of £38,000 for an additional member of staff, there would be a potential additional monies of £560,236 from the initial share of the funding as set out in paragraph 10.6. Non-domestic rates are often referred to as business rates, and members can see at paragraph 9.6 the inference of the scheme is that if the scheme costs less than its allocation of funding, as we have here, these monies should be used to support business growth and economic development activities. I therefore propose an amendment to the recommendations listed at paragraph 11.5, and that the paragraph shown on the screen should be added to the recommendations. That monies which are not utilised in supporting the revised scheme be used to protect business growth and economic development proposals in line with the priorities identified in the Council's Economic Wellbeing Plan. Thank you.
Just bear with a second. We're getting the correct wording. In the meantime, Councillor Hearn, if you wish to second, and we'll get the correct wording on. Can we also get it emailed round members, please?
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just happily formally second.
Okay. While we wait for the correct version, I'll come to Bailey Alistair Bailey for a comment. You may indeed have a point of order, Councillor Peter Bard.
Thank you, Provost. Obviously, this amendment has just been sprung on us and not gone through the usual channels where it might be checked for competence by council officers. So it would be reassuring to us to, rather than waste any more time on it, to check whether it's competent at this moment. Thank you.
Well, I'm yet to see the final version. I think probably the head of legal and governance is also yet. So once we see it, we'll rule on competency and give you that advice at that point. I'm trying to keep the pace of the meeting going by moving on. So I'll come to Bailey Alistair Bailey for his comment, and then we'll come back on the point of competency.
Thank you. In commenting, I'm sort of having to guess a little as the final comment of the amendment, but assuming it stays in the same direction, I think there is merit in what's being proposed by the Conservative group today. But I think it's a difficult timing to do this. I think in the past this has come up, and the precedent has been that I've generally moved towards not wanting to fetter the discretion of the council when it comes to set its budget in the new year. So I think with it being the December meeting, I'd favour a position where the council was left to make its own mind up come February, March about how to spend the monies. So I wouldn't be supporting the amendment if it stays in the form like it was on the screen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have a point of clarification from Bailey Hearn, but I have a point of order first of all from Councillor Tom Kuhn.
Thank you, Provost. Just when we get the full wording here, can we get the head of finance to explain where the current money is currently spent? Because this looks like a change in use of monies, and I think all of members of the council should be aware that this money is already used for other purposes, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that once I've seen it and we've ruled on competence in the first place. Bailey, I heard you have a point of clarification.
Yes, thank you. In discussions with the head of finance, there were wordings in that text that was put up there that was wrong, and it was taken out and changed, which does significantly change the premise of the text. So can we ignore what was put up and please wait for the text to come forward that was sent correctly?
Okay, thank you. We're hoping to have that very shortly for members. Does anyone else? Yes, we'll get it put in the chat if we can once we have the final version. Bailey Ahern, do you have the final version that you could put in?
No,
the
we
chat?
don't, because unfortunately it was done on Scott's laptop.
Right. Okay, so we will get the text as many ways as possible to you as soon as possible. Are there any other comments at this moment in time to speed the matter up?
Provost, would you like me to do my speech again uninterrupted this time? just while we're waiting.
Councillor Peter Barrett, you have a point of order.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. This is no way to conduct business, and in the absence of a competent amendment, can I just move that we move to a vote on the report in front of us?
So, in terms of point of order, you can move that effectively, as former Councillor Wilson would have put it, the question now be put. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Robertson. The wording is now in the chat. However, we have a point of order. now that you have the, no, right, okay, we're going to an immediate roll call vote on Councillor Barrett, Councillor Peter Barrett's procedural motion and Councillor Robertson's procedural motion to go straight to a vote on this matter. Mr. Henry, could you take a roll call vote, please? It's to go to the vote.
I'm sorry, Provost, we still haven't seen the wording of the amendment then. Thank you.
It's in the chat now, Councillor Duff. It's in the chat now. In terms of procedure, the standing orders say if we have a procedural motion, it goes forward to a vote. We've got it proposed and seconded. You can vote it down if you want to continue debate, or if you feel you've had enough debate, we can go to the vote. But we have to do a roll call vote. There is no intention to withdraw it, therefore we're just going to go to the roll call vote and move things along.
Provost.
So members, right, sorry, right, okay. Yeah, I'm going to be very clear. We have a procedural motion which takes precedence, which means that we are going to have a vote on that procedural motion. It will be a for or against motion. So if you're voting for, you're voting to go straight to the vote between the motion and moved amendment. It has been moved. So we have a motion and we have an amendment. The text is in the chat. So if you're voting for, you're voting for going to the vote immediately. If you're voting against, you're voting not to go immediately to a vote. So you can all decide whether you wish to go for or against, but we're going to move to that as required by the standing orders.
Point of order, Provost. So just to clarify, Councillor Barrett asked for clarification on the competency of the amendment. He's now asked us to go straight to a vote on the motion versus the amendment before you have ruled on the competency of the amendment. Could you clarify this and clear up for us what Councillor Barrett wants?
Okay. I think to be, okay, everyone, this is the last council meeting before Christmas. It's been a long day. We've had a lot of business, right? We're going to have this vote. It's been moved and seconded properly. We will then, if depending on the outcome of that, move to a vote. And at that point, we will have given you a ruling. After this vote, we'll give you a ruling as to whether the amendment is competent, because I need to actually confer with the head of legal and governance, which I will do now while the vote is taking place to try and keep things going. I'm going to ask the clerk to take the roll call. It is a for or against motion.
Thank you, Provost. In line with standing orders, as the Provost has just outlined, when I call out member's name, can you confirm whether you're voting for or against the procedural motion to move straight to the vote? Bailey Ahern.
For.
Councillor Allen.
I don't know what I'm doing here. For.
Councillor Allen, just to confirm, this is a procedural motion to that has been put forward that we move straight to the vote to determine the item of business. So you're now at this, without further debate, at this particular point, you're now voting whether we do that, we move straight to have a vote or consider the item of business, or if you're voting against, you're voting for further debate. So, Councillor Allen, if you can confirm if you're voting for or against the procedural motion.
I'm going to vote for.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
For.
Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
For.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
For.
Councillor Braun.
For.
Bailey Brock.
Against.
Councillor Carr.
Against.
Councillor Chan.
For.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Against.
Councillor Donaldson,
Against.
Councillor Drysdale,
Against.
Councillor Duff,
For.
Councillor Forbes,
For.
Councillor Frampton,
Against.
Councillor Freshwater,
For.
Councillor Harvey,
Against.
Councillor Illingworth,
For.
Councillor James,
I think 4, but I'm unsure.
Councillor James, can you confirm you're voting for the motion?
I'm voting for the motion if it means that we can continue to vote for either the motion or the amendment in the next round. Thank you.
That's correct, Councillor James. Councillor Clegally?
For.
Councillor Lang?
Well, I'm totally confused because I'm voting against because I want the debate to go ahead.
That's correct. So you're voting against. Thank you. Councillor Leishman?
Against.
Councillor McPherson?
Against.
Councillor Massey?
Against.
Councillor McCall?
Against.
Provost?
Abstention on the grounds of chair's role to determine whether debate continues.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen? Bailey McLaren?
For.
Deputy Provost?
Abstain.
Councillor Rebeck?
Against.
Councillor Reid?
For.
Councillor Robertson?
For.
Councillor Shires?
For.
Councillor Smith?
For.
Councillor Colin Stewart?
Against.
Councillor Grant Stewart?
Against.
Councillor Waters?
Against.
Councillor Welsh?
Against.
And Bailey Williamson?
Against.
Provost, we have 18 votes for, 20 votes against and 2 abstentions. So in terms of procedural standing orders, we now continue with the debate.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hendry. I'll let you keep that because there's going to be a vote. We are now continuing debate, and as promised pre the last vote, I will now give my verbal reasoning, which I have already provided in the chat. The view is that the amendment is competent, technically competent in the eyes of officers and myself, and therefore it is acceptable to go forward for a vote. Do any other members wish to comment? Indeed, we have a point of order from Councillor McEwen and then a request for a recess. So, Councillor McEwen.
Provost, my concern is that we're going to continue on with comment when actually people may have questions now for the head of finance, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
You are correct. I did promise that Mr. Walker would be made available to you to answer any technical points on this. He is here. I believe he's just hiding around there. Do you want to come and join us up at the table here? Okay, Mr. Hendry is also going to just provide some clarity as well.
Thank you, Provost. Just to make a point of clarification around perhaps some of the confusion earlier that led to the procedural motion, just to apologise in terms of any communication for the delay in having the correct wording of the amendment on the screen that had been put forward by Councillor Duff. This was a communication error amongst officers that led to the delay.
Okay.
Provost, I also have a.
I'm coming to. Don't worry, I'm coming to you next, Mr. Deputy Leader. You are next with your point of clarification.
Thank you, Provost. I'm just seeking clarification here that those that voted for the previous in the previous vote, these individual councillors are not wishing to debate the amendment that they put forward. Is that correct?
I don't think we need to go into this. Okay. So, do any members have points of clarification for the head of finance on the amendment. For the strategic lead for finance and business administration, to give him his proper full title. I have 2 points of clarification. I have a point of clarification from Councillor McEwen and then a point of clarification from Councillor Lane. So Councillor McEwen and then Councillor Lane.
Thank you. My understanding with this paper that what we're doing is that extending the resources that we will gain from taxation based on what we already currently receive. This motion or the amendment asks us to spend this money differently. So my question really themes around what do we currently spend the money we do gain from non-domestic rates on? Is it allocated to anything that is already earmarked, like things like the HRA account for building houses, or is there other things that the money may be allocated to that would therefore be changing by accepting this motion? And consequent to that, could it be then changed in the budget process?
So in the current year, the money was received from the Scottish Government. We received about £1 million in terms of non-domestic rates relief. The council took a decision not to change the relief scheme, and therefore there is no money available in the current year because it's all been applied towards the businesses that were already receiving those reliefs. Going forward, the amendment that's been put forward seeks to protect economic development activities in the budget process. So it'll just come forward as part of the revenue budget process that you'll consider for January and February to protect economic development activities.
This could all have been done as part of the budget process rather than spending half an hour doing this.
Yes, it could be done that way, yes.
Council Leader.
Okay, part of the question has been answered there, thankfully, that there's around 500,000, and it's, if you want to say it's extra money because of we're applying the rules differently, and that's where the money's come from, and that can be applied anywhere at the moment. I don't want to comment now, but I'd like a recess as asked for, so we can actually discuss the confusing last few minutes and maybe get to a suitable resolution without having to go to a vote.
Okay. On the basis of trying to achieve unanimity, a 5-minute recess, 5 minutes sharp this time, 4:05. Good afternoon again, members. Thank you for your patience. We were much more on time that time, so we have one outstanding comment, I think, from Councillor Forbes. And then if there are no further comments, it's my intention to close debate at that point. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I think given the news that's filtering through the room, my comments probably no longer necessary. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. We have an amendment and a motion, but I understand the mover of the motion is inclined to incorporate the amendment. So if Councillor Duff is happy to waive his summation, I'll go straight to Leader of the Council for, or if you wish to.
So waived.
Thank you. Mr. Leader, would you like to sum up then and incorporate?
Yeah, thanks. I'll do it very briefly. Alison Williams has come here and I've just checked with her that she's wanting to come back again and join us in January after this. So at the moment it's yes. So now that I understand the amendment, I think that I'm quite happy to incorporate and we can all move on closer to our Christmas. Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Leader, are you happy as
well? Aye, what he said, yeah.
Wonderful. In the spirit of Christmas, thank you. Members, are we happy to agree the revised motion?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we now move on to item 12, council tax charges for second homes. And this will again be introduced by Lynn Brady, Service Manager, Revenue and Benefits.
Thank you. Legislation expected to be passed this week gives local authorities in Scotland further discretion on the level of council tax to be levied on second homes. The proposals within this paper assume that the legislation will not vary from the draft regulations, and agreement is therefore sought in principle pending the passing of the necessary legislation. Currently, such dwellings can, by legislation, receive a discount of between 50% and 10% or receive no discount. This council's current policy is to charge the maximum amount allowed and to award no discount. This is 100% charge at present. The new power allows the council to impose a 100% increase, meaning a 200% charge on such dwellings. This paper proposes that the council make full use of these powers and introduce the increased charge from the 1st of April 2024. It should be noted that protection from this increase will remain in place for purpose-built holiday homes and job-related dwellings, including those linked to the armed forces. Such dwellings will retain a 50% discount. It should also be noted that the use of discretion on the application of the 200% charge is being proposed in certain circumstances, for example, where owners are carrying out major repair work to render a property habitable. If accepted, this proposal will bring the charging of council tax on second homes in line with that charge for long-term empty dwellings. It is estimated that the proposed charges will generate approximately £2 million per annum for the council. As with the previous paper, a request is made for a small proportion of this to be retained to assist with the administration costs of this. This paper gives the relevant definitions, gives an overview of the powers available and also the current provision. It proposes the charges to be applied from 2024 onwards. It outlines the use of discretionary powers and it seeks approval of the proposed scheme. If approved, we will communicate with all relevant parties as soon as possible. And as with the last paper, I'm supported by my colleague Kevin Fraser and finance colleagues to take any questions and give further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Lynn? Councillor Forbes first.
Thanks, Provost. The question on 1.3, I'm not sure if we're aware, if we've been told this or not, but did the legislation get laid before government and pass?
I checked this afternoon at lunchtime and it was still in draft form, so it's not yet been passed.
You can.
Just, do you have any idea as to when it's likely to happen?
The information I've been given is due to be passed this week.
Okay, thank you. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. Would the legislation or the draft legislation allow a council, if it so wished, to increase the charge by more than double, or is double the statutory limit? Thank you.
Double is the statutory limit, no powers to increase it beyond that.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. I'm assuming the extra money we're talking about here would go to the second home council tax fund, and that money itself is used for affordable housing. Am I right?
No, it would not. There's no requirement for that to go towards affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Provost. Similar question to the last paper as well, particularly Section 8, use of discretionary powers, obviously the decisions within the department to make. Again, how will that be policed, and will there be a right of appeal for people who disagree with your judgment? Thanks.
You already have an existing scheme in place for those who wish to appeal against the 100% charge for long-term empty properties, and we're proposing to use exactly the same mechanism as it is for those. And again, with all discounts exemptions, there is an appeal process. With this one, unlike rates, rather than the appeal coming to the council, it would go to the tribunal service and be held independently.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thanks. Just reflecting on Bailey and Councillor Forbes's questions. If the legislation is still draft, does that mean that the 200% statutory limit could change during the passage of the legislation?
It's possible but not anticipated. And again, if there's any change from the draft regulations to the formal regulations, we would obviously reset and bring the paper back to a future committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Angus Forbes.
That's the second question, Provost. If there are other people ahead of me.
I'm aware, but I'm just letting you go.
Very kind of you. Thank you. If someone had a second home and this forced them to do something different, which I guess is what the purpose of this is, and say they decided to then apply for and hopefully get a license and planning permission for short-term let, would they be better or worse off financially by doing that? I mean, in terms of tax, would they give us more or less money in terms of tax?
The head of
It
legal.
would depend on how much letting they actually did. If they did more than 70 days letting a year, it would go into non-domestic rates, potentially eligible for small business bonus and pay nothing. If the letting was less than 70 days a year, it would still by definition be deemed a second home and pay the same levy.
So if they let for more than 70 days, are you able to give me an answer as to whether they would be better or worse off?
I think that's going to depend.
They would be better off. Yes, they would be better off. They would pay either non-domestic rates, and subject to any reliefs and exemptions that may be available, they may pay nothing.
Okay, Councillor Willie Roberts.
Thank you. When you and Lynn gave us the briefing on this paper, which I thought was very helpful, you intimated there's quite a number of empty homes which came under this remit as well. They have double rates, didn't you? If there's a total of 1160 holiday homes, if you asked the question at the time, have you had an opportunity to find out how many empty homes there are?
I don't have the exact figure, but I think from recollection there is approximately 800 long-term empty properties. And as I say, I will get you the breakdown by band and by area in due course. But again, we reckon there's about 700 or 800 long-term empty properties in the council area who are already paying 200% charge.
Okay, Councillor Bob Brown.
Thanks, Provost. So it's the end of the day, so I'm probably not picking this up correctly. If I could just query with Mr. Walker again, this extra money, normally second home council tax goes into a second home fund, but in this instance you're saying it doesn't. Am I understanding that right? And is the reason why it's not?
So I think you are referring back to the premiums charged on empty homes. There was two chunks of legislation around that. The first chunk was absolutely explicitly to go towards affordable housing. The second element, councils were free to use it as they chose, and we've used it for various purposes through the budget. This latest element is free to go towards council services.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. Is the purpose of this to raise money, or is it to solve the housing crisis?
I think that is quite a political question for officers to answer, probably. And I suppose, depending on what the leader of the council moves when he moves his motion, that's probably a political comment you can make after you've heard his reasoning for doing so. I think. I don't think it's a question for officers. Okay, I don't have any further questions. Therefore, I'm going to invite the leader of council to move his motion, and you can all make your mind up for yourself based on that.
Thanks, Provost, elected members, and thanks again to Lynn and to Kevin for the work they've done on this. As the report sets out, the legislation underpinning this proposal has not yet been laid within the Scottish Parliament, although we've heard from Kevin is expected to be done on the 6th of December. We are asked today, therefore, to take a decision in principle to apply a 100% increase in the council tax charged on second homes. Should there be a material change to the draft legislation, as the question asked, we will be given the opportunity to review our position. The report sets out potential additional income for Perth and Kinross Council in excess of £2 million. This year, that £2 million will be used to help close our strategic budget deficit. We'll be able to protect jobs and protect services, and that's what we will use it for this year. Appendix 2 also confirms that this income will be generated from all 12 of our council wards, albeit, as you can see, in different amounts in different wards. Since the concept of charging a premium for second home was introduced, I have constantly argued that it should be applied to the provision of affordable housing. However, given the financial challenges we currently face, given that we don't have our funding for next year confirmed yet, given that it may take time to generate this income, and given that the legislation has not yet been laid, I'm suggesting that that is not for just now. Instead, I'm committing that this administration, along with other groups, will look to commit 50% of the net amount raised in 25-26 and the 26-27 budget process to deliver much required affordable social housing and social housing in rural areas. This time lag will give us time to make evidence-based decisions and see the actual figures that we achieve. And moving this report today, I'm also giving instructions to officers to accelerate the identification of sites for affordable social housing across the whole of Perth and Kinross. And I'm very happy to move this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader to second.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief. I repeat the comments I made in the previous paper that I very much welcome the proposal that the Scottish Government will devolve decision-making in respect of council tax charges for second homes to individual local authorities. The administration's motion today reflects its view on the need to accept officers' clear recommendation to introduce this increased charge for some 1,160 homes across Perth and Kinross. And I support the Leader of the Council's motion that with effect from 25-26 we aim to direct part of the income generated from this change in as much as we prudently can towards future funding of more much needed affordable homes in our rural areas. It's notable that over 90% of these second homes are located in these rural areas, and so that is only right. Happy to second. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Leader. Are there any comments on the paper? I have Councillor John Duff with a comment, followed by Councillor Leishman.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to say I welcome the comments of the Leader of the Council in terms of how these monies will be used in the next 2 to 3 years. I think we all recognise the financial issues facing the Council and the issues of affordable housing in rural areas, so that's very welcome. I can also just take the opportunity to thank Kevin, Kirstine and Lynn for the briefing the other day. It was very helpful and very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Leishman.
Thanks very much, Provost McDade. In September this year, the largest local authority in Europe effectively declared bankruptcy. Birmingham Council had issued a Section 114 notice, meaning it can't fund its forecast spending for the next year. The result being over 1 million people will see their council spending cut. This isn't just an English problem. To provide historical context, the ideology of centralising power and more recently the sustained and brutal cuts to council funding we've seen in Scotland means that local government's influence has been significantly reduced. Last week, at the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee, we heard that 5,155 children living in poverty in Perth and Kinross is now 5,914. With the funding we receive, it is fantasy to think that councils like us will be able to lift our people out of poverty. And with that being the dreadful reality, as I said previously, we have a chronic housing emergency. For decades, housing has become a commodity and a financialised market. Both local authorities and people became the victims of conservative ideologies, such as right to buy the depleted council housing stock and ownership and accumulation of assets, as opposed to people getting a fair day's pay for a fair day's work as the determination of one's wealth. However, there are some lucky people who manage to assemble a portfolio of properties. Each to their own, whether you think it's right to make rampant profits out of someone's basic human need of shelter and having somewhere they can call home. This proposal gives us a chance to do something that will benefit the many, raise revenues, provide vital council services, and down the line, to use at least some of it for the good of social housing. So Provost, I'm 100% supportive of the 100% increase.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman. Councillor Tom Kuhn.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'd just like to echo Councillor Duff's comments about being able to build houses in rural locations. But I think what we have to understand is that the real barrier to building houses in rural locations is actual land and not actually necessarily the finances of which to do it with. So I do advocate that any councillors within rural areas, you really do need to start influencing the landowners and property owners of vacant properties within your wards to see if they'll give those properties or bits of land to the council to possibly build on. Because without that land, then this money won't be spent on building any houses because you can't build them in mid-air. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. I don't see any other indications to come in, and therefore I'm going to come to the Leader of the Council for summation.
All I would say, I'd like to thank members from across the chamber to their positive response to the paper and the way that we're looking to address the funding that's coming in. Thank you.
On that note of consensus across the chamber, members, are we all happy to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Members, item 13 is the update to the scheme of administration. Are members happy to agree the proposals in the agenda regarding the scheme of administration? Agreed. Thank you. Member item 14 is appointment to committees and outside bodies. Are members content to agree the proposed changes to membership in committees as set out on the agenda, and note that the Deputy Provost will receive the lower councillor, senior councillor allowance? Agreed. Thank you. Item 15 is changes to 2024 committee timetable. Are members happy to agree the additional meeting of full council on Monday the 22nd of January 2024? Agreed. Thank you. Members, item 16 is the elected member briefing note that have been issued since the last meeting on the 4th of October. Are we happy to note those? Thank you very much, members. That concludes today's business. Thank you for your patience throughout, and we are 4 minutes short of my finishing time, so you get an early finish as well. Wishing you all a very happy Christmas when it comes.